Hello. In this video we explore the 74 largest atrocities since 1769, in which a total of over 240 million innocent people lost their lives. Our journey through time helps us see modern history from a counterintuitive perspective. While democracy has been a powerful force for good, a precious gift worth fighting for, democratic empires murdered astonishingly high numbers of people. 1769. In England, the Industrial Revolution is dawning. The conquest of India by the British East India Company has begun. Both the Atlantic and the Islamic slave trades have already killed millions of innocent people. We compare the democratic pioneers of every time period with the rest of the world. For the next 50 years, we used a very low standard for democracy. It has been called the Age of Democratic Revolution, but only Britain, the United States, and France for some years during its revolution are ranked as democracies. We estimate that about 6.1 million slaves were killed by the slave systems of non-democracies, like Spain, Portugal, and Brazil, after 1769. Roughly 2.7 million slaves were killed by democratic frontrunners, like Britain and the United States. Roughly 4.5 million slaves were killed after 1769, in the systems of the Islamic slave trade, which lasted into the 20th century. In the century from 1819 to 1918, we used the Polity 4 dataset to distinguish the democratic pioneers from authoritarian regimes. The Taiping War of 1850 to 1864 was the largest civil war in history. The Qing Empire in China fought the Christian socialist rebels of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Britain, France, and the US strongly intervened in the conflict. We estimate that the main perpetrators killed 14 million people. Another large civil war in China, the Muslim Dungan Revolt. The 19th century is dominated by mass atrocities of European colonial empires. The Great Hunger in Ireland. According to our analysis, the British colonial crimes in India amount to the largest mass killing in history. We need to emphasize that British rule in India was not exceptionally cruel in comparison with other atrocities. We can only explain this shockingly high death toll by the fact that the most highly industrialized country ruled over the second most populous territory for almost 200 years. Most of the victims perished in famines, for which the British were at least partially responsible. The Congo Free State was a colony which was privately owned by King Leopold II, the constitutional monarch of democratic Belgium. Roughly 10 million people were killed through slave labor, famine, and disease. We also see the war in the Sudan between the Anglo-Egyptian colonial forces and the Mahdi's Islamist fighters. After the European powers have used their destructive war machines to conquer most of the world, they turn them against one another. Both democracies and autocracies killed millions of civilians in the First World War. At the end of the war, many new democracies are born. In the century from 1919 to 2018, we use the VDEM liberal democracy and rule of law indicators to measure a high standard of democracy. The next box doesn't fit on the screen. The Second World War was by far the deadliest war in history. The Nazi regime probably killed around 24 million civilians. 6 million in the Holocaust, the worst genocide of all time. More than 10 million civilians were killed by the Japanese Empire, and millions more by the Soviets, the Chinese armies, and smaller forces. Democracies killed about 9% of all innocent victims. The war against the Axis powers was necessary. But we need to remember that Soviet and Chinese fighters suffered by far the greatest casualties. In the 20th century, we also see major communist crimes. The Russian Civil War. Stalin's communist regime probably killed around 15 million civilians. They perished in famines, the Gulag system, and the Red Terror. The Chinese Civil War. Mao's communist regime killed around 40 million people, most of them in the greatest famine in history, for which Mao's Great Leap Forward was at least partially responsible. We see communist crimes in North Korea, Cambodia, and Ethiopia. Most atrocities between 1945 and 1990 are related to the Cold War. Western and communist nations fight proxy wars in the global south. We see Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. We also see the civil wars in the Sudan and Nigeria. France's colonial war in Algeria. After the Cold War, we see the Second Congo War and the Rwandan genocide. So these are the top 25 mass killings. Let's add the rest of the 74 largest atrocities. Authoritarian regimes killed roughly twice as many people as democratic pioneers. But we have to keep in mind that more than 5 times as many people lived in dictatorships than in democracies in the modern age. So, believe it or not, democratic frontrunners actually had a higher state murder rate than other regime types. Is there something wrong with our numbers? Maybe. But, even if we use the lowest estimates for all of the mass killings by advanced democracies, and the highest estimates for all of the crimes by dictatorships, the numbers still add up to a higher state murder rate for the democratic frontrunners. In this video, we explain why democracy is an important part of the solution. Democratic pioneers never once killed large numbers of their own citizens. But, they have been among the most powerful states since the Industrial Revolution. And power had a bigger impact on state murder rates than regime type. This image shows mass killings by powerful states. This image shows atrocities in populous countries. Almost all crimes were worsened by great power interventions. In an astonishingly high number of cases, powerful democracies supported dictatorships or terrorists. On average, we assigned roughly 7% of the blame to the democratic patrons. We consider this a very low average. Democratic frontrunners were either perpetrators themselves or supported perpetrators in 64 of the 74 largest mass killings. Once we take the growing world population into account, we find a decline of state killings. Our world has clearly become less violent after the world wars. But imagine being alive in the Belle Epoque, before the Great War. Back then the world had also seen a decline in violence, which was dangerously deceptive. In the 21st century, global warming, hyper-inequality, and the return of hostilities between great powers, armed with nuclear weapons, could reverse the trend. Any flag can be used as a blinder that keeps us from seeing the wrongdoings of our government. There is no God whose name cannot be misused and abused to torture and kill. Even our most precious ideals, like social justice and equality, or democracy and freedom, can be turned into propaganda weapons. But if we learn to respect every nation, culture and religion, we can fight poverty and violence, injustice and tyranny, together. If one day, we can tear down the ideological walls between us, just enough to shake hands and talk, the story of humankind may very well have a happy ending.
Every nation must now develop an overriding loyalty to mankind as a whole,